Welcome today. We are so excited to be with you guys. Let's bring our expert on. That way I'm not alone talking to myself. Hi, Sean.
Hi, Leah. How are you?
You ready?
I am ready.
I'm doing good. So this is Sean Schaus, and he is our expert today for our live tips from an expert. And today I'm pretty excited because I'm positive I'm going to learn quite a bit from you on some home energy efficiency, conservation tips, and best practices. And my husband will be very thankful for whatever knowledge I can glean from this. Very excited. So, again, this is Sean. In a moment, he'll give you a little more information about himself, but just some kind of housekeeping things to take care of. We're so happy to have you guys here to learn about home energy efficiency and conservation. And you are welcome to ask any questions that you have for Sean. Just throw them in the comment section throughout this live. And then at the end, we'll make sure to go through all of those questions or even comments that you might have. And even during that comment or excuse me, Q&A time, if another one comes up, just throw it in there. And then later on, even when this live is over, if you're able to view this later, throw your questions in the comments and we'll make sure to send them on to Sean and get you guys an answer. So are you ready, Sean?
I'm ready to go.
Great. All right. Tell us a little bit more about yourself. We'll get your next slide up and get to see your face.
Okay. I'm one of 5 agricultural engineers scattered around the state with ISU Extension and Outreach. What we do is a lot of consulting with farmers. A lot of things like manure management gets a lot of my time, but you get lots of odd nicknames when you tell people you work with manure a lot. So in this case, though, we also cover a lot of homeowner kinds of questions out there. And Leah's listed several of the things: composting, energy that we're going to be talking about today. Indoor air quality in homes sometimes generates a lot of questions, and home maintenance issues. And way back when I started, we were talking about radon in homes. Don't hear as much about that anymore, but that's still an issue. And we would visit with folks about those kinds of things too. So if it has something to do with your home and it has something to do with an engineering kind of topic like the maintenance or energy or air quality, we're good folks to start with. And if we can't find you an answer, we'll dig around and find a better expert to send you to. So let's just jump in here. We'll talk about energy. This time of year, it's been really, really hot. And so let's start with some air conditioning tips out there for trying to stay cool on these hot days. One of the first things you might consider doing is installing a programmable thermostat. I don't know, most of you are not my age, but you remember when thermostats look like that, you know, and you go out here and turn the dial on it? They don't look like that anymore. Well, actually they are. Some of them are round again now, but thermostats now are programmable, so you don't have to go in and make all these adjustments. You can program the thermostat to set the thermostat up or down when you're going to work, when you're coming back home, when you're asleep, all those kinds of things. And all those little changes in the thermostat setting can save you money over time. So make sure that you've got a programmable thermostat. And now there are newer versions that are not just programmable, but they are what they call learning thermostats. So they just watch the kinds of changes that you make and then put that into the program for you. You don't have to sit there and punch the buttons on the thermostat. It just kind of watches what you do and tries to learn your behavior patterns. So that's another option available. And a lot of thermostats now can be connected to your internet in your home, smart thermostats, so you can make changes from elsewhere. And so that way, you can make a change if you leave the house for the weekend and you forget that you weren't going to be around. You can log in and turn your thermostat up or down while you're gone and change it before you get back home again. Really nice option to have. Don't overcorrect your settings. This is something that people frequently do. The thermostat just tells the furnace or the air conditioner whether to be on or off. It doesn't tell it how fast to work. So if you come home, the house is a little warm, you want to cool it off, turning it down 1 or 2 degrees will turn the air conditioner on. Turning it down 5 degrees won't make it cool off any faster. The risk with that overcorrection is you might forget to bump it back up, and pretty soon you're thinking, boy, that went a lot farther than I intended to, and that just costs you extra money every time it shoots past the target temperature. So just set it where you want the temperature to be. It's either on or off, and that's all you can do. You can't speed it up by bumping that thermostat even farther past your setting. Cleaning the filters on the furnace itself lets the air move more freely through there. More air through the furnace heat exchanger means faster cooling or heating of the home. So keep those filters clean, change them probably every 6 months, at least once a year, and keep those clean. And then use the right kind of thermostat setting. If you're using some fans to move more air in the room, you can probably keep that thermostat up as high as maybe 77, 78 and be quite comfortable in your home. No need to cool it down to the point where you're feeling like you need a sweater on. So that pro tip, remember we started off by saying those little changes make a big difference. 3 to 5% savings on your air conditioning bill for each degree that you would change that temperature for a whole day. So if you're only doing it for 8 hours, then it's maybe a third of that, but still, those all add up. So keep those in mind as you're playing with thermostats. On the next slide, we talk a little bit then if you don't have air conditioning, what can you do? Or if you're trying not to use your air conditioner to save some money. And the first tip there is just use fans to move that air. Stirring that air passes the air over your skin, evaporates moisture off your skin just a little bit faster, makes you feel cooler. So use the fans, especially at night, to keep you cool while you're sleeping. If you're not moving, a fan nicely positioned can keep you cool all night without cooling all the rest of the house. If you have ceiling fans in your rooms, ceiling fan running and stirring air in the whole room can probably make you feel 3-4 degrees cooler than you would without that ceiling fan running. So make use of those. Let that moving air help to cool you if you're trying to stay cool without changing the temperature in the house so much. And we all know that sunshine shining in through the windows brings a lot of heat with it. So when the sun is shining in the windows, if you can close that off during the day and keep that sunshine off of you and off of the furnishings and the floor of your house, that'll keep that little extra bit of heat outside. It's even better if you can shade the outside of the window. A lot of houses used to have awnings over the windows before air conditioning was common. We've kind of gotten away from that, but that's even better. So a tree in the yard that shades the windows in the summer, or an awning, even better to keep the heat out before it gets through the glass. But shading on the inside helps as well. And then opening the windows up at night when it's cool. This works sometimes of the year especially well, or in drier climates works even better than it here does in Iowa. We know that here, summertime heat is often accompanied by humidity. And if you let really humid air into the house, even if it's cool, that can make everything feel muggy and sticky inside. So what I like to recommend to folks is watch the dew point temperature in the weather forecast. Unfortunately, here in Iowa, with crops and livestock, dew point is important, and most weather stations report the dew point, or websites that have weather, they'll have the dew point on there. If the dew point is above about 60, 65, it's going to feel humid outside. When it gets to 70 or even 75, like it was yesterday, it gets really oppressive. When you watch for that dew point, if it gets down to 60 or less, that's good quality air to bring through your house in the evening. It's going to feel nice and cool and dry. So I watch that dew point temperature to decide when I want to open the windows overnight. The next slide, then, we talk a little bit about ventilation. And ventilation in a home is a good thing. It's a necessary thing. But there are two different kinds of ventilation. When the ventilation is controlled, it can be a really helpful thing. So when we're controlling that air exchange, we call it, through the house, inside to outside, if we control it with something like a heat recovery ventilator, or you might have heard them just called a heat exchanger, that is a fan that forces ventilation of the house, brings outside air in, but it exchanges some of that heat out of the air while it's doing that. So in the winter, it's going to pre-warm that air a little bit as it's coming in. In the summertime, it would cool it just a little bit as it comes in. That kind of a ventilator can do a great job without costing you so much energy loss while it's ventilating the home. Kitchen and bathroom fans, what we would call spot ventilation, are used to get some particularly humid or smelly or polluted air out of that spot in the house, and they generally just exhaust it to the outdoors and the air comes in somewhere else. But those are another example of focused ventilation where we tell it exactly, I want to move this much air from this spot in the home. And then a whole house fan, another good example. These are large fans that exhaust air out of the house, typically in the center of the house somewhere, like in a hallway ceiling perhaps. And those blow air out of the house, and then you rely on opening windows to let that air come back into the house wherever you want. That can cool a house down really quickly overnight by drawing fresh air in through all the windows and exhausting it out through that whole house fan. If you'd like to get a taste of what that's like, you can do a really makeshift version of that, which I do frequently in the summer. I'll put a box fan in one window of the home, exhaust the air out of that window, and then crack other windows in strategic places to let the fresh air come in. Not as powerful as a whole house fan, but will give you kind of an idea of what that's like to have a forced ventilation system for evening cooling the house down. The other kind of ventilation is when it's not controlled, and we call that infiltration, when it's uncontrolled coming in. And lots of different ways that can happen in a house. Wind can drive that, where on the windy side of the house, air is leaking in through any cracks, and then on the downwind side, the air is leaking out through cracks on that side of the house. My office is terrible about that. We first, when we moved in, we locked the panic doors open during the day, and if the wind was blowing, it would actually suck the doors open, and they'd just hang there a foot open from all the air getting sucked out that downwind side of the building. Really leaky building, but that was wind-driven infiltration. The chimney effect can play a role here. That's the warm air tending to rise to the highest level of the house. As it does and finds a place to leak out up high in the house, it draws fresh air from outside in through lower openings in the house. That can be really noticeable in the wintertime when there's a big difference between the outdoor and indoor temperature. And negative air pressure infiltration can do that too. Anytime you turn on a fan that's blowing air out of the house, you make a little bit of negative pressure inside the house, and so air is going to leak in to try to balance that pressure difference again. Some things generate lots of pressure difference, like a chimney on a fireplace, a really strong thermal effect, moving a lot of air out of the house can suck a lot of air in through other spots in the house. So next slide, we'll talk a little bit about kind of the 10 maybe most common places you might be losing energy. Most of these have to do with that air infiltration into the home. Door frames, trim, baseboards, any place there's a crack that leads from inside to outside the home, a big place to look for those air leaks that can cost you energy. I know that door right over there that you can't see that goes out to my garage has a nice big crack at the bottom. I know it's there, and I replaced the seal on it several years ago, but it needs to be done again. And I know air leaks in through that in the wintertime. Windows, same way. A lot of older windows are pretty leaky, and even some new windows, if you're not careful, can get leaky. So that can be a place where a lot of air can leak in and out through the walls of the house, through those windows, or around the window frames even. Outlets. If you ever lived in an old house where the wind would blow and you could feel the air blowing in through that outlet on the wall, they can leak a lot of air because that's a hole through the drywall or plaster right into the wall cavity. If the air can get inside that wall cavity from outside, it'll come right through that outlet and into the room, make a really nasty little cold draft there in that spot of the room. Exterior walls, any opening in an exterior wall can potentially become a leak of air in and out of the house. That can be a bad thing for energy conservation and drafts, but it can also let moisture get outside, and then that moisture getting into the wall cavity can cause problems out there. So that's another reason to watch those. We mentioned fireplaces being a way that you can move a lot of air out of a house. And so the fireplace is an exhaust when it's running, but when the fire is out and you're not using the fireplace, if you don't have a good damper to close that opening from above, air can come backwards down that chimney and into the house, and that's a big hole when the chimney goes up there through the roof. So you want to make sure that that can be closed when the fireplace is not in use. So any other holes for utility pipes, vents, anything that goes through the house to the outdoors can be a leak coming in and out. Up above there, number 4 was vent flues, where those go up through the ceiling and through the roof to the outdoors. If those are not sealed around those flue pipes where they go from the interior of the house to the attic and on up to the roof, those can leak a lot of air. It's a little more difficult to seal around those because they get hot. So you have to be careful, use the right materials if you're sealing those. Ceiling lights can be a big one. If you have recessed lights that are built back into the ceiling, that's a hole through the ceiling into the attic in the upper floor of the house, and that can leak air right up into the attic space. Sometimes those would be in what we'd call a soffit, maybe above your kitchen counters or above your vanity in the bathroom. There may be a lower part of the ceiling, a soffit, and there might be lights recessed into that. You'd want to make sure then that the air going up into that soffit can't get on up into the attic space above that. And while we're talking about attics, the door that goes to the attic, of course, is a big opening. You want sealed, weather seal around that attic door access so that cold air doesn't come down through it in the winter, or hot, moist air doesn't go up through it in the winter into the attic space. And then the basement is another place to look. Where the house sits on the foundation, that gap there typically has a sealer of some kind of sealing material that was laid on top of the foundation before the house was built. If that gets deteriorated or the bugs chew through it or it just wasn't there to start with, could be a gap there that lets a lot of cold air in the wintertime, in addition to letting bugs and other critters come through there. So that's another good place to look, like in the diagram, where that sill plate sits on top of the foundation. Those are all good places to start looking when you think you might be losing energy. And when most people think about energy loss, they think about insulation. So on the next slide, we'll talk a little bit about an insulation checklist here. Typically, we would say start in the attic. Well, why is that? Because the attic is typically a wide open space, large surface area, and a lot of heat from the house can be lost up into the attic. So it's a good place to start. It also happens to be one of the easiest places to add insulation. If you have an unfinished attic, so it's just exposed on top of that insulation, it's really easy to measure what's there. It's easy to add some more on top of it. So it makes a really quick and easy place to get a big bang for your buck adding some insulation to an older home. So start with the attic, then head down to the basement. Look at that top of the basement foundation we were just talking about and make sure that that band joist all the way around this outside of the house has insulation on it. There's not bare wood there that's just got the siding over the outside. Look at the basement walls and see if they're insulated. A concrete wall or a cinder block wall doesn't have much insulation value all by itself. So if there's exposed wall there, that cold on the outside, no insulation value to speak of, you can be losing a lot of heat energy out through that in the winter time. It's a good place to think about adding some insulation, at least on the top half of your basement walls, if not the entire wall. And then check, of course, the other place in the basement that might be losing some heat. If you've got any crawl spaces that are over unheated areas, make sure the floor above that crawl space is insulated so you're not radiating heat, losing heat down through your floor into that cool spot. So those are things, some of those are really easy. The attic is a really good place to start because it's an easy place to add insulation. When you get to the walls of the house, you notice we didn't talk much about the exterior walls of the home. It's a little more difficult to get insulation added to the walls. That might be a place you want to have an expert involved in evaluating what's there and what your options might be for adding insulation. It can be done by a homeowner, but it's much more difficult and time consuming to work on the walls. So start with the other places that are easier to check, easier to add, and make sure that you're off to a good start. So on the next slide, then we'll just talk about something related, but kind of entirely different than the building shell itself. What about in the laundry room? Is there anything we can do there to save energy? And it turns out there are some quick and easy tips there. Number one, just make sure you wash with full loads of laundry so you're not running the machine multiple times for the same amount of clothes. And use cold water whenever you can. This was news to me years ago when one of our human sciences specialists shared it with me. The vast majority of clothing these days washes just as well in cold water as it does in warm or hot. So make sure you pay attention to the instructions and use cold water when you can. Most of the energy used in washing your clothes is for heating the water, not for running the machine. So go ahead and make use of that. Use the cold water always for rinsing, and most times even for the washing, you can use cold water. Use the high-speed spin cycle or the extended spin cycle. The more water you can spin out of the clothes, the less you have to take out with the dryer. And using the spin cycle to remove water is more efficient for that water removal than using the heat energy in the dryer to evaporate that water. So use the spin to your benefit there. Air dry the clothes if you can. If you've got an outdoor clothesline and can dry some clothes outside, that makes use of free energy out there rather than you having to buy gas or electricity to do that. And cleaning the lint filter seems obvious, but it's easy to overlook. And besides that, I know I always like to see the thicker that layer is on the lint filter, the more fun it is to roll it up when you take it off of there. I don't know why that seems like so much fun, but you should do it more often than I do. Clean it off every time you run the machine. Just make sure that air can move through it as well as possible. And that moisture removal from the clothes relies heavily on the amount of air through the machine. Each cubic foot of air that goes through can only pick up so much water on its way through the dryer. You want as much air as possible going through there, so clean filter makes it easier to do its job. The last one there is making sure that you dry similar types of clothes together. I've noticed this too, drying a lightweight shirt or a bed sheet in with heavy towels. Those lightweight things are dry long before the towels get dry, so it's just tumbling them for a long time without helping them anymore. It'd be better if I would separate those really heavy types of fabric and dry them separately from the lighter weight stuff. So those are some tips on things around the house and even in the laundry room that might save you some energy. And we did our best to try to pick some of the things that we thought would be applicable to most folks and easy to do. But we're curious what kinds of questions you might have. So as you're thinking about questions, I'll mention that there are some things you can look for to save some money on this too. So sorry, Jordan, I'm jumping all over the place here. The three ways you might want to check to see if you can save some money or share the cost of these energy improvements. Check with your utility provider, whoever provides your gas or your electricity, and see if they've got some rebates for some larger energy improvement projects. Frequently they will, because it helps them too if you can kind of even out your demand for energy. They have a tough time meeting those peak demands, so they like energy efficiency projects and might have rebates that can help. Also check and see if there are some low interest loans available if you're looking at a bigger ticket item like re-insulating a home or something like that, or a new, more energy efficient furnace and air conditioner. There might be some low interest loans that can help save some finance costs on that type of project. And also check for some government sponsored assistance and grant programs. Several of these targeted specifically at low income families or elderly homeowners can be very helpful in energy efficiency projects. So watch for those kinds of things. They can help a bunch on some of these projects that might get expensive. And with that, maybe we should stop and see what kind of questions we've generated here, what kinds of other things you might like to talk about.
I took notes, copious amounts of notes. That was great, Sean. And I also, as a fellow person that speaks with my hands, I appreciate your visuals. That's very good for us visual learners. I also want to note, as you are the expert here, it is also proven to save some energy when your kids do their own laundry. That is true, right?
It actually, I am sure that is true. Saves a lot of my energy when the kids do the laundry themselves.
Exactly. We don't need to mention what kind of energy is saved, but energy is saved. Okay. I will make sure that if they watch only a little snippet of this later, it is that. So, all right. Well, we've got some questions. What I'm going to do, and again, if you've got more questions that come up, viewers, go ahead and throw them in the comments. I'm going to click them up so that way we can see them at the bottom of the screen together. And I'll just kind of try to go a little bit in order. So you talked a little bit about insulation. So what are some types of insulation? Do you have recommendations?
Yeah, there are three really common types of insulation out there. One would be fiberglass batt insulation. Looks like that kind of stuff. It makes your arms itchy when you work with it, so be careful about rubbing that against your skin. That's very common, comes in rolls or can come loose and be blown into place. Another one that gets blown into place in the attic a lot is this ground up fiber, cellulose fiber. It's probably mostly ground up newspaper. So it starts out gray usually. This is kind of brown because it's been in my attic for 30 years. Got a lot of dust mixed in with it now. But that one is typically the cheapest for the amount of R value you're going to get if you're going to blow it into a space like an attic. Makes a perfect insulation for adding on top of other insulation in the attic. And the other is foam insulations, and there are several different kinds. When I talk about foam, a lot of times people think of this kind of foam, the white beadboard foam. That's good for ice chests, but that's not what we use in homes. So the foam insulation that we would use in a home would look more like this, much more dense, usually yellow or blue or pink. That rigid foam insulation has higher R value, that's resistance to heat flow per inch of thickness than the other two we talked about, but it tends to be more expensive too. And you can get foam insulation that's kind of comes as a liquid and blown into place. This is one I picked off of the wall of my basement where they filled a hole with it. And so that blown or foamed in place foam insulation also has a very high R value and is really good for filling in cracks and gaps. So if you're trying to seal the air infiltration into the home at the same time you're insulating, that foam in place can be a really good option because it can do two things at once. So multiple types of insulation out there, different kinds of costs and pros and cons for the type of space you're trying to insulate. Good to talk to a contractor or an expert about which type might suit the remodeling job that you're doing.
Is that something someone could, send you an email and you'd be able to give your opinion on?
Sure. Yeah. One of our engineering specialists could give you some thoughts on the advantages and disadvantages of different types for your project, and also refer you to a number of bulletins from Iowa State and other universities about insulation products and their use.
Yeah. I know we at our house have used the spray foam too, that you had the little piece that you pulled off of, but we do have younger kids that we know it looks fluffy. It looks just like slime, but do not touch it. And again, I'm loving the visuals, Sean. You're really speaking my language right now. Okay, so early on you mentioned composting, and that kind of had some minds turning here. So if someone's new to composting, what are some tips that could help them have some success?
Yeah, there are a number of good background pieces on composting and some really, really complicated, good websites too, if you want to dig really deep into it. But the basics.
Pun intended. Dig really deep.
Yes.
I like that.
The basics of composting is getting the right recipe. So you need a combination of things. You need some green material, which is usually something like grass clippings or fresh leaves. That green material brings a lot of nitrogen with it. Then you need some brown stuff. A lot of times that's older compost that's already finished, or dead leaves, wood chips, sawdust, that kind of thing. Brings a lot of carbon with it. So the nitrogen and the carbon are both important. And then you need the right kind of moisture content so that the organisms, the fungi and the bacteria and the bugs that want to get in there and make the composting work, they need that moisture to survive, and they need air. If you don't give them enough air, enough oxygen, other types of organisms will take over that will break down those materials, but generate a lot of bad odors in the process, the anaerobic decomposition. Typically, we want to avoid that if it's anywhere close to the house or people, because it just stinks. So that happens if your compost gets way too wet. Then the air can't get in there and it'll start to smell sour. So nice fluffy compost with a good air moving through it and the right blend of nitrogen and carbon. And there are lots of bulletins that'll give you an idea of the nitrogen to carbon ratio of different materials and how much of each you would want to blend together.
Yeah. And my husband composts. So I am a supportive wife. I don't throw away the eggshells. I compost them. But we don't do meat, right?
No, typically we don't. I mean, you can compost animal products like that, meats and cheese and things like that, with a lot of protein in them. The reason we don't typically for backyard composting is because they tend to attract varmints who want to get in there and dig through the compost. And once they find out there's food in there, it's really hard to stop them from coming back to your compost pile.
Yeah. I definitely love animals. But...
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good to know. Good to know. Okay, so we've got someone that lives in an apartment. Some of the changes or things that you've talked about, they just can't do because of that. So this specific question's in the winter. They've got some drafty windows. What are some ways that someone living in an apartment could handle that?
Yeah, if you can't make structural changes, you can't replace the windows because you don't own the building, then you might consider some things that you can do that are temporary. So there's a type of caulking called rope caulk. Rather than coming in a tube that you would squeeze out and it would stay there, stick to the materials somewhat permanently. The rope caulking comes in a bead and you can stretch it out kind of like silly putty or clay and press it up against the cracks, but it doesn't stick permanently. So if somebody objects to the appearance of it, you can just peel it back off and throw it away and do it again next year. So that can be helpful to seal up cracks that you notice around the window frames. And the windows themselves, if where the two panes come together in a double hung window, or the seal around the perimeter of an awning type window or a casement window that cranks out, if those leak too much, then consider some of the plastic window cover kits. There's an adhesive you put around the edge of the window frame, and then you stick the clear plastic over it and shrink it a little bit with a hairdryer so the wrinkles all disappear. Those work really well, actually, for sealing up air leaks on windows. I've used those, I think, in every home I ever rented. We used the window sealing kits. And you can get them for the outside of the house or for the inside, either one. They're quite effective, actually. So.
Perfect. Okay, another question. We've got someone's son moving into dorms soon, and the dorms are not air conditioned. Ooh. So what are some ways that this soon-to-be college student can be staying cool?
Yeah, I'd say if you don't have air conditioning, then a fan is your best friend. So I would take along a fan or two. Fans don't use very much electricity, so it's not a problem plugging them in usually. And just that air movement can make you feel a lot more comfortable even when it's warmer in the room than you want it to be. A really small fan that can be mounted so it kind of blows on you where you're sleeping can be really helpful at night. Pay attention to the amount of noise that they make. Unless you like white noise while you're sleeping, you might want to run the fan before you buy it and see how noisy it is, or look for a sound rating on the fan if you want it to be quiet as it's running. But fans are probably the best way to try to stay cool when you don't have air conditioning. And then the window treatment thing that we talked about, if the sun's shining in the window when you don't need the natural light, cover the window and keep that extra heat out during the day. Then it's a matter of whether you can cool things down in the evening if the air is right outside, to try to move some air through it in the evening to cool it down.
Yeah. When you talked about a fan in the dorm room, my mind went back to earlier when you actually talked about a fan where it was pulling the warm air out. Is that what they would want to do in a dorm room? Like having it in the window but blowing the hot air out, or would they want it turned the other way?
Kind of depends on the shape of the room and where the windows are located. If you've only got one window, then it may be more just stirring the air in the room than anything else. If there are more than one window, then yeah, if it's nicer outside than it is inside, you can set a window fan either way, either blowing air out so it's sucking it in the opposite window, or you can turn it and try to blow air out the window. I tend to think it's more effective, for me anyway, to set the fan in the window and have it blow out of the house if it fits the window fairly well. Now, if the fan is considerably larger or smaller than the window is, that can be a little more difficult. And that's where students get, inventive about cutting a piece of cardboard to fill the gap and things like that.
Yeah, that's where the future engineers are, come on, guys.
You know it.
We also talked a little bit earlier before we started about if there could be, fans being plugged in, if there's any electrical issues to be thinking about. And you kind of said that with the smaller appliances, not as much, but in a dorm room setting, you might have some things to think about.
Yeah. Fans don't use a lot of energy. The small fans that we're talking about, a 20-inch box fan or a smaller 10-inch personal fan. So not going to overload the electrical system by plugging those in. But you do want to be careful about using extension cords for fans. You don't want to create a tripping hazard with the cords, or don't ever put cords underneath the rug to try to prevent it from being a tripping hazard, because then it can overheat underneath that rug or insulation. So be cautious about using the extension cords, but the fans themselves don't use near the amount of power that something like a space heater or a coffee maker would use.
Gotcha. Okay, let's see. We've got another question. So, families that experience a lot of allergy symptoms, what are some air quality tips that maybe they could be following or things they could be checking?
Yeah, if you have family members who are allergic, it always helps if you know what you're allergic to. If you can identify the allergens that are most troubling for you, then you can watch for their level outdoors versus indoors. For example, one of my sons is terribly allergic to ragweed pollen. So most of the year he would do fine, but every fall, about the time school was starting, he would just plug up terribly. And so we just got to the point where we would watch the pollen reports each day. And when ragweed pollen started going up, we'd close the house up and keep it shut up and use the air conditioner until the pollen count went back down outside. So if you know if it's oak pollen or ragweed pollen or something like that you're sensitive to, you can watch those levels and try to judge whether you're better off to open the house up and ventilate more fresh air through, or whether the outdoor level is higher than the indoor level likely, and you want to keep the house closed for a while. If it gets to be really bad, you want to consult your physician about what else you might be able to do to help reduce some of those symptoms. But watching the air quality reports can maybe help you decide whether you want outdoor air in the home today or not.
Yeah, that makes sense. And it is a hard time right now to have allergies, because when you're sniffling or coughing or anything like that, people look at you a little more cautiously than normal.
Yes, that's right.
Okay, let's see. We've got a few other questions we can chat about. Heated floors. What are your thoughts? Which I'm very interested in, because I would love some in my bathroom.
Yes. In some places, they're fantastic. Heated floors typically feel really good to people, and the heat is all staying in the house then. It's partly just the contact feel of walking on a warm floor that feels nice. People with heated floors can run barefoot in the winter, and the rest of us don't. And they're fairly efficient because that heat is right there in the living space where the people are. And most of us in a good part of our day in the home are closer to the floor than we are to the ceiling. So having the heat at the floor makes sense, and the heat rises and feels comfortable. They're expensive to put in, and they don't react very quickly. If you want the room to change temperature quickly, using forced air is the fastest way to warm the room up or cool it back down. But if you are watching things and anticipating the changes in temperature that you want, you can work around that with a slower to respond heat, like radiant heat in the floor. By the way, it's also common or popular in farm shops too, because it helps to evaporate moisture off the floor too, so the floor stays drier and warm. And if you're working underneath the equipment in the farm shop, it's nice to have a warm floor under you. It can be really hard on your legs and feet if you're standing on really cold concrete while you're working out there.
I was just thinking about my cold feet when I'm doing my hair in the wintertime. So I wasn't even thinking about working outside. We had an interesting comment come in, and I am very intrigued. So we've heard about homeowners installing their own solar panels. Is this a task I can is this a DIY task, or is this a call in the professional?
It depends on how big a system you're talking about and what you want it connected to. If you're talking a system that's just going to power a specific item, then yeah, you could probably do that yourself. If you wanted to use it just to charge a battery, or you wanted to use a passive solar panel to heat a porch or something like that, or the garage, you might be able to do that on your own. If you want to feed that back into your electrical system, though, tie that into your electric system, that gets a lot more complicated, and there you would want to have experts involved, because you can't just connect to your electric system and feed power back into it without approvals and the right equipment and such from the power supplier. So it depends on how big a project, what kind of thing you want to do with your solar panels. We use solar panels at the research farm to run a pump out in the greenhouse, and that we didn't have to have experts involved, because we weren't connecting to the electrical system. We were just running power from the solar panels to a pump. We could do something like that ourselves. Used to be a lot of DIY bulletins for passive solar heating systems for homes and farms back in the 1980s, when I was relatively new to this job. So yeah, it can be done for some kinds of things. And this would be another place you might just want to contact one of us and visit a little bit about what you have in mind, and maybe we could give you some thoughts on whether this is something you want to tackle yourself, or whether you want to get some experts involved.
Yeah, I was telling you earlier, that has been probably my favorite thing since I joined the extension family, is starting to realize, gosh, there is always somebody I can call with. It doesn't matter what the question is. There's a specialist for that. It's pretty nice to know. I might find something online, but I don't know if it's research based. I don't know if this has been tested. Whereas when I call you or email you, I know it has been tested. Let's see. We've got another question coming in from Jordan. Do smart home Bluetooth light bulbs use less energy than regular light bulbs?
Probably not when they're turned on. The advantage of something that's a smart item like that can be connected is that you might be able to control it to have it turned off more frequently than it's on. So that's about control, and can you save some on time by having control of it remotely? So I would say, yeah, the amount of energy used by the item, by the light fixture, is pretty much strictly related to how many watts of consumption it has. Now, being able to turn the lights on before you get to the house in a dark winter evening has some safety advantages, might make it worthwhile, and maybe better to have a smart light that you can turn on remotely than to just have it on a timer or something like that, or leave it on all day. So yeah, there could be some advantages there. There are a number of different types of light bulbs available now. The LED lights are getting better and better, and the price has come down considerably. They typically, for household lighting, will give you the most light for the least amount of electrical energy going into the bulb. So that's a good thing. And they are getting pretty good, too, about long life. So if it's in a difficult to reach place and you have to replace it only once every 5 years as opposed to every year and a half, that can be a big advantage. So look at those
Yeah.
kinds of things too. And the sensors are good for lights, especially things like outdoor lights that can turn on only when it's dark outside or only when someone is present. Those can all save energy too, just by turning the lights off for you when you're not there.
Perfect. Yeah, we have a ceiling fan that is not fun to replace the bulbs in. So we have invested in some higher priced bulbs that last longer, because that is not, we just end up living in the dark. We just don't change the light bulbs. They burnt out. It's too much work. We're lighting candles, kids. It'll be fine. I did get a message from a friend of mine with a question. It says, is there a husband-proof programmable option for a thermostat? Maybe a password. Her husband seems to walk by and change it every time she's not looking. So and I would say my husband wants one for the wife, because I get cold or hot and I'm the one that's jumping 8 degrees up or 8 degrees down. So
Yeah, well, if you have a smart thermostat and you're the only one with the password to log
there you
into
go.
it, but
There's
I
the
think
hack.
most of them you can still change if you're right there in front of it. So
When there's a will, there's a way.
yeah, no, there
Perfect.
might be a market for that though. You might want to consider that.
Maybe. Well, maybe that's how I get rich. There's my millions. I got to find this. All right. So let's see. When it rains, this person seems to get water in their basement. They've got a sump pump that works, but there's still water coming in. Any thoughts on what they could be doing or looking for? What's going on?
Yeah, that's a real common question in a wet summer in Iowa. And there are a number of things that start with trying to get as much of the outdoor water away from your foundation as you can, making sure that you've got gutters that are in good shape on the house, and the downspouts get the water out at least 10 feet away from the home so it doesn't run right down the outside of the foundation wall. Things like that, looking at the landscaping in the yard, make sure that the slope is moving water away from the house. Those kinds of things all help to reduce the amount of water out there. In some cases, that's not enough. The water table is just high around the house. And then we have to start thinking about, all right, now we need to collect the water and try to pipe it away from that foundation. There are inside ceiling and drainage options if you can't dig around the outside of the house to collect the water and get it away. It can be done from inside the basement also, typically more expensive to do it in there. And certainly all of these kinds of things are relatively simple and inexpensive to do when you're building the house. But once the house is all done, all of these things cost a lot more money. So a lot of folks like me move into the house and then they think, oh gosh, they didn't put any foundation drains around the house. Why did they not do that when it would have been cheap and easy? So, but yeah, there's a lot of issues there that can be discussed and options to look at. Because nobody wants a wet basement. That's just
no. It's like I have yet to hear of anybody that enjoys water in their basement. We experienced that one year where we had water coming in. That, oh no, this is a huge fix. What's da da da? And we found out it was just needing to clear out one area of our gutters where the water was just not able to drain, and fix that, and saved some money that year. So.
We'll it's great when the simple answers work. Yeah.
Yeah. What's that going to be? Okay. It looks like we've got one more, unless we get some others coming in. So the comments, I love the look of those Edison bulb string lights on outdoor patios. Is this a good choice, or is there a better choice with that similar look?
I've never purchased any of those, but my daughter-in-law loves that look too. And I think that if you look, you might find some of those Edison look bulbs that are LED, little tiny strings of LED lights in there rather than a hot filament bulb. And they probably are very efficient for energy consumption. And so take a look at that and see. But I kind of think maybe that's what she found, was some that were LED bulbs that looked like an Edison bulb.
So when you go over to your daughter-in-law's house, your son and daughter-in-law, are you looking around going,
yes,
is that LED? Is that?
Yeah, but they're used to that.
I'm like, I'm interested in you coming to my house and peeking around a little bit.
Yeah, we're always looking. Speaking of that, that's just engineer hazards. But here's another toy. If you're concerned about energy use in your house, look for one of these. This is a non-contact infrared thermometer. It looks like a gun, but you pull a trigger on it, and it receives the infrared heat into the thermometer, so I can measure the temperature. I'll just do measure the temperature of my computer laptop. There is at 88.2 degrees, and I didn't have to touch it to measure it. So something like that, relatively inexpensive. I think this one was only $15, and I can check the temperature of the wall back there. 81.5 degrees.
Oh my goodness.
My wall temperature back there. So in the wintertime especially, I can run around the house with this and check corners of the room, check for cold spots on the wall. It's really a handy little tool for looking for cold places where there might be some missing insulation or an air leak that's making the wall cold in that spot.
I think if I get my husband one of those, maybe for a stocking stuffer, I feel like it would be a new hobby. He would just be going around.
Yes.
And everybody's that look is very like the no-touch thermometers that a lot of people might be seeing at doctor's office or whatever. So that's
same technology. Yep.
I know. I pay with a really fun tool belt of things that can scan and measure and all kinds of things. All right. Well, we have kind of entered into a slowdown of questions. So I think we'll kind of finish it up. And then, like I said, if other questions come in, I'll make sure to get those onto you and you can send resources back. So yeah, we'll put your contact information up. And like you said earlier, if you're not the guy with the answer, you can find who that person is with the answer or resource for people. And like you said earlier, while you have a lot of knowledge on the home energy conservation, you have a lot of knowledge on a lot of other areas that people can definitely, we can throw your creds in the comments because it's a long list. I mean, I had to pare it down to 4. I think there was like 20 bullets that you're the specialist in. And I thought, oh man, I got to up my resume here. So yeah, we're glad you guys joined us today. Again, if you're watching this later after the lives ended, if you've got questions, throw them in the comments and we'll still get back to you. Anything you're thinking that we need to cover before we head out, Sean?
Oh, thanks for the opportunity. It is a lot of fun to visit about these things. And I think you would find that the other ag engineers around the state like me are equally enthusiastic about these nerdy kinds of things.
But do they bring props?
Well,
you brought props.
Yeah, we're all kind of toy people. So
if I schedule anything with them, they're gonna bring props because I like that. I now know more about insulation because I saw it and heard about it.
There you go.
All right. Well, feel free to write down Sean's email address, throw him a message, tell him thanks, or hey, I want to learn a little bit more about this. And also just remember that Iowa State University Extension and Outreach, we have specialists in all 99 counties, and we're here to serve you guys in pretty much any way you can think. We definitely have a lot of specialists that can cover that information. Also, if you've got any ideas for future live tips from experts like this, things that you want to learn that can help you, your family, your home, your business, those type of things, shoot us a message on our main Facebook page. We'd love to hear from you guys what you want to learn from our experts here. So, well, thank you so much for joining, Sean. I really did learn a lot. I'm going to make sure my kids hear that tip about energy saving and them doing their own laundry saves mom energy. It's just science. That's all. But yeah, have a great day. And I hope you guys enjoyed this.